Today we're gonna make a set of dice using syringes, and I'm gonna show you some of the finer points of how I use them, some things about cleaning them out. We're gonna test a couple of ways to clean them out, see how they work, and just make some pretty dice. So these are the syringes that I've bought. They come in a set. They come with this and this. They also come with a few of these bottles. There's a couple different sizes. I use them for water, alcohol, various liquids, and these various types of tips. Now these are all blunt needles at varying cc's. We have these cone tips. We have some straight blunt needles. There are some thick, straight blunt needles, some very thin ones, some open tips with no needles, and these cool bent ones. Those come in a couple different gauges. Where's the other one? There it is. Those come in a couple of different gauges. So there's a lot of variety within these, but the problem is with these metal needles is they can be difficult to get all the resin from inside the needle tip, especially the small ones. And once that hardens in there, you're done for. So these super long needles are my favorite to use. They have a nice long reach. So here with like a D20, they're really easy to get all the way to the bottom and do cool swirly things or reach way around inside any of your larger dice. And because the opening, I don't know if the camera can pick that up, is a little bit thicker, they're a little easier to clean. But they don't always clean out well. So if you want to know when you're using needles like this on a syringe, if they're okay to use after you've cleaned them, pull the plunger, and when you let go, it will suck it back in if there's a clog, because it creates a pressurized environment. This one is clogged. See, this one will not even move. So this one, you can see it's sucking it right back in. Oh, that's stiff, yeah. So this one is clogged somewhere in the needle, and you can, somewhere in the needle, he's clogged. So you can take that off and test it, and he moves really freely inside there, which means this needle has some gunk in it somewhere. So we're gonna try something to clean that out in a little bit. Now I've also got a bunch of these tips. These being plastic and cone shaped are a lot easier to get inside to clean out. Oops. So with these, if you get gunk stuck in there, you can tweezers get in pretty far. You can use X-Actos to get in and scoop things out, and if it gets clogged in the tip because it's plastic, you can just cut it right off, and then you just have a wider tip. So these you can get a lot longer use out of versus these metal tips, but the metal tips do have their place in using them for, say, squirting dyes inside your dice. So we're gonna mix up a couple of different sets. We're gonna squirt some bloops in with these cone tips, and we're gonna squirt some dye in with these little metal tips. Another use that these have is making liquid cores. I like to use the needle to stick it into the core and inject my fluid. I'm not using glass balls. I've been using 2-haft resin spheres, so finding a way to get into to there has been challenging, and being able to create just a little hole that I then stick this in, and it actually reduces air bubbles as well. So let me just, if I can get this to focus. So as you can see, as this rolls around here, there's almost literally no air bubble in there. There's a few tiny ones, which kind of are needed, but there is no giant air bubble, so to speak of, in here. And yes, I will make a video on how to do eyeball dice. So now I'm gonna gear up with my respirator and let's make some dice. So here I'm just mixing up good old NASUBI resin, and once I have that all mixed, I'll separate it into little cups and give it some colors. I'm just setting my timer over on the side there and mixing for a full 5 minutes. If you are not using a timer when you're mixing your resin, you may not be mixing long enough. I got in the habit right from the get-go of setting a timer, and I've never stopped. As you can see, this app that's on my phone screen there has a bunch of preset timers, and the name of this app, I'll try to link it to at least the Google store. I'll see if I can find it on Apple on my computer, because I'm an Android user. Sorry, Apple people. Is called MultiTimer, and I did pay for this. It was really inexpensive and has been absolutely indispensable for making dice. So I have timers on there set for silicone mixing and for when my pressure pot, and I have 2 pressure pots, so multiple pressure pots. I don't have to remember anything. So I have put some resin into my little cups at the bottom there and put a nice clear base in each cavity of the mold. I decided to do these as blanks just because there's a risk of injecting the resin dye and it not curing and having it absolutely completely exposed on any of the faces if I go too far down into the mold cavity or too far over to the side and it doesn't get resin around it fully and cure. So to prevent that, I am doing them as blanks. So these are the colors that I'm using, and I'm just gonna flip these over so you can see through the bottom. I have a white, a light purple, it's kind of like a yellowy peach, and the pink. That we're going to inject just like medicine. And the only comparison I can make is my husband is a diabetic. So just like diabetics inject insulin, you just stick the needle right inside the bottle, which is what I'm doing off screen. The opening is pinhole sized. And so I'm trying to find the pinhole with my respirator on. It's kind of hard to get a good angle and look at it. And so once I've got it in there, there we go. I can slide it all the way in and make sure that I get the air out at least as much as possible. And then it sucks it right in just like any fluid or medication a doctor would administer via syringe. And I happened to drip into the cavity right there, so just stirred it around a little bit. And then I just inject a little bit into each mold. And you can see in the cavities that they are pretty defined. I ran out in that one. There's just one tiny little drop when we're finished. As we're rotating it around, you'll see. And then I have a cup here of isopropyl alcohol. I'm just sucking the alcohol into the syringe to clean it out. You want to make sure when you're using syringes that you have a cup of isopropyl alcohol at the ready so that you can immediately dip your syringes in there and suck some up inside to start the cleaning process. And then now I'm going to mix the white resin up, and I think I mix all the colors. At least this one is mixed. Yes, just the one. And I'm going to pour it into the syringe. So you can, just like pipettes, stick the tip in there and pull the plunger and suck it up. Sometimes you'll get it in there, sometimes you won't. And I find it far more reliable to just pour it in the end. You just pop that plunger right out the back. It just requires a little bit of wiggling. You don't want to just pull straight out because you can break it. So you do want to be gentle when you're wiggling it out. And then you just pour the resin right into that open end. You do want to make sure that your resin is like running down the side of the inside of the syringe so that it's easier to prevent it from just like splooshing all over the place when you put that plunger back into the syringe. And then I'm just holding it upside down here so that the resin runs down the syringe to the plunger and creates a little air pocket at the top. Not everything will run down, but 90% of it will. And so when I push on the plunger, a little bit at the top will come out, but then I can get rid of the air. So we're not injecting air inside of our dice, and we're just injecting resin. And I actually just removed the tip on this one because it was a tiny, tiny little hole, and it wasn't doing what I needed it to do. So I just removed the air that way. And then I just put little bloopity bloops in here. And the dye that's in there, if we didn't put anything else in these blanks, the dye would stay exactly as it is and have very defined swirls. Resin dye is very thick, and whenever you put it into resin, the full, two-part mixture mixed together, it just kind of stays where you put it. If you start pouring resin in on top of it, swirling things around, sticking syringes in like I'm doing here, it stirs the pot a little bit and it allows it to kind of mix ever so slightly. So I'm being as careful as possible to not agitate it too much, to really keep what I'm injecting into each resin cavity as separate as possible. And so I'm just topping off my syringe here with what's left, and I'm going to inject that into the remaining dice. And of course, wouldn't you know it, at that very moment my camera died and I had to switch to my phone. I finished up that white color and I had started with the yellow already, and so that's where the camera from my phone jumped in progress here, is with the yellow partially done. So I just injected it into some other clear spaces and then immediately into the isopropyl alcohol when I was finished. And so last now is this light purple color, and I'm going to pour that into my syringe here in a minute and then inject that around. And this is exactly what I meant right here. You can see it running down the one side of the syringe and not like catching the air and creating an air pocket underneath it before it slides down. So I've let it run down the side, and at this point, time is of the essence. So I just went for it. I didn't bother to work that air bubble out at the end or at the top. And I'm just putting little drops in, and you'll see once I show you the finished blanks how these light purple drops, some of them you can see that I stuck in there. This 6, I just kind of dripped a few on top there, and I'm just kind of going around until this purple runs out. And I got a little careless and like stirred that pink a little bit, so it didn't stay quite as defined as it originally was, because at this point I got a little reckless and was kind of stirring it up myself. So do be careful if you have something in mind where you want your colors very distinct and defined using this method. To don't be careless like me, to not be careless like me rather, and don't go mixing or stirring your, agitating, that's the word I want. Don't go agitating the cavities. And so then I'm just going to top these off here with a bit of clear resin, and I'm kind of flooding it in and around. I just kind of like drizzle it over the top. I've found that to be the least disruptive way. If you just pour right into the center of the cavity, it's going to create like a mushroom cloud circulation of the resin flowing around in there, and it can look really cool. But if you're trying to create these defined spots and like leave things where you put it when you injected it in there, then you're going to want to make sure that you pour like around the edge of the cavities and just let it kind of flood in to the dice cavity rather than just pour it straight in. And so now we're just going to clean these out. And I may actually go back and do another video on cleaning these just because my aim was so bad in keeping this in camera, mostly because the actual camera died and I was still shooting with my phone here, and it's kind of like off center, so I thought I was in a good spot and I just was not. So these are just some different ways that I clean these out, wrapping tissue around the tweezers, which the tweezers are really pokey, and so sometimes they just poke right through and it doesn't work real well. You can also twist it up by the corner and stick the corner. You can see it right there, kind of, sort of. So sorry. That was a slightly better view. If you grab it at the corner and just twist it into like a little cone, you can shove it way in there. There we go. And that will clean a lot of it out. And I think I was trying to show you there for a moment, and then realized that you probably couldn't see it because it was yellow on white. So that one is all cleaned out. This, I believe, is a syringe we used for the resin dye, and so I only had to rinse it out and just pull the needle off and then just pull the plunger out. I do completely dismantle it to let it air dry, just to be sure that everything is out. This one had some of the resin in it, and so I pulled that out. I cleaned off the plunger, and I'm just cleaning out the needle right now, or the tip rather. It's not a needle. And I'm not sure what method I used because I did it outside the view of the camera like a terrible content creator. So just running some alcohol through the tip of this one a few times to make sure that anything I can rinse out will get rinsed out with the alcohol. And let's see if I show it on this one. And no, yet again. Oh, God, I'm fired. Somebody fire me. So if you twist it up really thin, oh, there we go. You can kind of see there, I'm pushing on the napkin and it's shoving the bit of resin that's way in the tip out through the hole. And so then I can just wipe that off from the outside. And you can do that a few times. And there's a little bit more. I don't know if you can see it when I hover over like the water or something darker. There was a tiny, tiny little dot on the end of resin that I was pushing out. And I decided I'm just going to throw that one back in there and let it soak in the alcohol while I clean this one. So this one, just rinsing out again with the IPA, dismantling the syringe itself, rinsing it out a few times. Those holes in the end of the syringe are generally pretty easy to clean. If you twist up some paper towel. Oh, here, look at me. Good content creator. Okay, there. Wiping down the plastic rubbery bit of the syringe. If that dries out, just squirt it with a little bit of mold release, and it will slide up and down inside there good as new again. Sometimes the alcohol can dry out that rubber and then it sticks and it's really hard to control. It's jerky, but once you mold release it, it just slides right through. Oh, there it is. Perfect. This is exactly what I've been talking about. You just twist it up and you can stick it right in the end there. And that same method works for the tips. You're just twisting it up into that little cone and then shoving it inside, and you can use, Look, am I showing you? Oh, there she goes. Just like that. Okay, so yeah, you can just shove that in. Still worry because camera. And a totally clean syringe tip now. Something else I have found effective on occasion, and I don't generally keep it around right here. I keep it in other places for emergencies. See, there's the tip cleaning method again. I'm just shoving that in there. And it can be tedious, but when you're going for this very specific effect of bloops in particular places and you want them in very specific places, I find it absolutely worth it. And then what had happened here is the paper towel ripped inside of there and it got stuck in the tip. So I'm just pushing it through the opposite direction with a pin. I keep a little straight pin for unclogging, or I don't know, it comes in handy quite often. Poking things. I may have a few of these resin dyes I haven't opened and used yet, so I can open it with my straight pin. I also do a lot of sewing, so I have lots of straight pins just laying around. But if you don't do a lot of sewing, just grab some safety pins and they work just as good. But as I had started to say, the other method that I have that I keep around, but I don't have handy while I was doing this, and I generally only use for certain situations, is thick string and sewing needles. And you can run a thick string through the sewing needle and then stick the string into the IPA, and it will suck the isopropyl alcohol up like a wick and clean out the resin. And you can run it through like a pipe cleaner to pull out all that resin. And here, just cleaning out that tip again. There must be more paper towel stuck in there. Haha, there it is. So those are the ways that I clean these little syringes. So this here is the tip that was full of resin in the beginning in that syringe that was totally stuck, and somehow the footage disappeared. And what I did was use the string and a very thick needle and pushed it through so that it could soak up. I ended up using acetone because this resin was hardened, and acetone is a somewhat effective solvent, or rather an effective solvent for hardened epoxy resin. And so I allowed it to soak in that dish in acetone and then pulled the string through, and it did not come clean at first. And I poked at it some more with a long, thick needle, like an upholstery needle, I think it was. And eventually I was able to knock whatever chunk of resin was in there out, and it is now again a usable needle. I am so sorry that footage disappeared. I wish I knew where it went. But let's take a look at what those finished blanks looked like. Now, again, missing footage mishaps has led me to take secondary footage. I did record the demold of this, and again, I have no idea what happened to it. So this is footage after I had started drilling out one of them. I'm going to use them as geodes, and I wanted you to see how defined the various bloops were. Even though there's 4 colors we put in here, they are still very defined and easily identifiable. They did not swirl together really and mix, other than where I put them next to each other or on top of each other, injected them into each other, so to speak. You can still see, though, however, that pink resin dye that I injected into those near the top is still near the top. It didn't swirl in and sink or mix. It's pretty much right where we left it at the top. And the purple I had injected down the sides and deep into a couple of them, and it fell in pretty nicely. Some of the
yellow where I did on the sides of these. Right next to the purple is like, it's still separate. It's right next to each other and it's touching, and you can see where they're touching and where they blended just like on the edges of touching, but they did not mix together. It's still very separated, very defined. This is a blob of purple, this is a blob of yellow, here is a swirl of pink, and here is a swirl of, what else did I put in there? White. So the colors are still very defined. Here you can see I injected the yellow on top of that bloop of purpley white, and it like indented it. Here is a really good clear view of the 20, and if you saw when I was injecting these, I was aiming towards the side a lot, and so like the whole center of this is clear. There's no resin bloop, and there is such a good shot of the 3 bloops being right next to each other, but they did not interact. They're just there next to each other. So as you can see, you really do have a lot of control with the syringes, and you can be very precise and get extremely defined bloops and swoops. And then here, oh, see, there's that little itty bitty bit of pink that I had mentioned in the beginning when I ran out. And then the swirls of the white and the purple. And those are the blanks. Very defined, very vivid, very colorful little bloopies. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you really enjoyed it and you learned something and will ditch the pipettes and start using some syringes. If you have any other questions about syringes, or you'd like to see any technique done in detail or something I did not cover with the syringes, definitely let me know and I will get a video in for that. I've got a few more in the works, of course, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to let YouTube know that you liked what you saw by hitting that like button and subscribing so other dice makers can find these helpful videos. Until next time, thanks. Bye-bye.